I'm Kevin Coleman with the Santa Post, and I'm at the end of Chillicothe's council session at the Ross County Service Center because they expected a pretty large turnout. Reverend Terry Williams, you are part of the opposition to the so-called anti-camping ordinance, Chapter 555?
Yes, the proposal is to add Chapter 555, which is camping in public spaces.
So you gave a pretty fiery sermon there, which I caught on tape.
Yes, it is Holy Week, and the ministers of Chillicothe are well situated to give fiery sermons, particularly about things we care about. And I'm just very frustrated because this legislation has been poorly drafted from the start. It has been cobbled together. There hasn't been much discussion among the committee members about it, at least in public. And we're now at a place where after weeks and weeks and weeks of opposition and hearing from community leaders and individuals who directly work with these populations, there's been no changes to the troublesome parts of the legislation. And I think the struggle is this legislation is bad for Chillicothe. There are enough people who are opposed to it that we're not going to let it go. And if council continues pressing like this and it ends up being signed into law, there are some of us who are coming together to run a referendum or an initiative petition to put it before the voters, because the voters don't want this. The majority of people in Chillicothe know that we have compassionate police officers who care for our homeless folks. They care for people in this space. They do a great job. And for this council to pass legislation that implies that they're not doing enough as police officers, and to pass legislation that the police officers themselves still have questions about in terms of enforceability and liability and unfunded mandates, it's just disgraceful. So yeah, I'm fired up today because at the end of the day, treating your neighbors well is what we do in Chillicothe. That's what we do best in Chillicothe, and the best of Chillicothe was not on display tonight in City Council. Those City Council members decided to dig in their heels and press forward on an agenda that nobody asked for and nobody in this community truly supports when they find out all the facts.
Well, with the passage of the legislation tonight, isn't it pretty much, I mean, it's what, a 30-day and then it goes into effect?
My hope is that the mayor will exercise his prerogative to veto the legislation. In cities and situations such as this, if the mayor disapproves of a piece of legislation, he can send it back to council and say, these are my objections. The mayor is presented with a choice of, does he approve of the legislation? If so, he signs it. If he does not approve of the legislation, he returns it to council within 10 days with those objections. Council then, by statute, has, I believe, 10 days that they have to wait and consider it, and then they would have to come back and vote on that legislation again. That veto override, to my knowledge, would require 6 votes, which currently, unless somebody on council decides to change their vote, they don't have 6 votes to pass this legislation. But regardless of the outcome of the legislation, whether they pass it with 5 votes and the mayor signs it, or they pass it with 6 votes and an override, there will be a committee to put something on the ballot in November to make sure this travesty doesn't go into effect.
All right, and you have been watchdogging council. It seems like you read Ohio Revised Code as much as the Bible.
Oh, I read the Bible much more than the Ohio Revised Code.
Okay.
Just come to church, 10:30 a.m. on Sundays at Orchard Hill United Church of Christ. You can hear all about the Bible. But the Ohio Revised Code should be the Bible for our public officials in this space. Sadly, they don't seem to read either very much.
It sounds like there's a definite threat of lawsuits, but you'll try the referendum first?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it, Kevin, as threats. I think it's important for us to understand that litigation is something that people leave themselves open to as a liability. Many public records requests that I have posed, I've sorted through, and there have been an example, at least once, of members of the subcommittee having conversation privately about how they intended to vote on measures publicly. That opens them to an open meetings lawsuit, perhaps, should someone choose to bring that. Again, that kind of action has 2 years to be brought. It has a lot of moving pieces and technical elements to it, and the lawyers inherit the earth at the end of the day. I'm just a preacher, not a lawyer, but I have some good lawyer friends. So we are going to be looking at every way we can to keep this inhumane, unjust legislation from harming people. We do believe that there's a lot of good that can be done in this space, but at the end of the day, this legislation isn't it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it sure needs to be better than what it is, because this legislation not only targets homeless folks, it has elements within it that affect private property owners. Private property owners in vehicular entrances are subject to restrictions in this legislation that aren't actually defined. We don't know what a vehicular entrance on private property is because they left it out of the definitions in the law. It's been cobbled together, as you heard from Mr. McKeever, from places like I believe he said Mentor was one of the spaces, New Philadelphia certainly, a couple other places in Ohio that have absolutely nothing in common with Chillicothe. They just cobbled it together like Big Frankenstein Bill and shoved it here. So I'm looking forward to any way we can to stop bad legislation, because this place can do good work, but this ain't it.
Would you disagree that the ordinance, that it lessens penalties, that it requires police to offer assistance?
I'd absolutely disagree with that, Kevin, because currently police do not have the ability to charge people in many of the spaces that are opened under this legislation. Being able to charge someone for criminal trespass is restricted to certain spaces that aren't public thoroughfares and right-of-ways. This legislation vastly expands the spaces that can be charged, even though it lowers the initial severity. And for me, as a person who works closely with folks who often get in trouble with the law, the fact is all it takes is one entry point for a person into the legal system to end up in a cycle that goes nowhere fast. If a homeless person gets a $25 or $50 or $400 ticket versus 3 days in jail, it really doesn't matter, quite frankly, because they've got as much a chance of paying that $400 or $500 as they do being able to survive that 7 days in jail. It's cruel, it's harsh punishment, it's not what we ought to be about in this city. We ought to find better ways to integrate with people and organizations like Community Action, like organizations within the school system that are serving these populations well right now. And they're assisting our police officers along with the social worker in the city police.
How can people learn more?
I think people can learn more by reaching out to their council members, asking them why they voted for legislation that a great number of people don't want and that the police themselves don't want. If the police don't want it and the preachers don't want it, why did council vote for it? Ask your council members, and go ahead and show up to the referendum and initiative petition training. There are going to be a few people helping to host that at the North Side branch of the library. That's at 550 Buckeye Street here in Chillicothe on Monday, the 21st of April at 5 p.m. You can find out in general how to run a referendum or an initiative petition to legislate at the ballot box. It's a nonpartisan training. It's a training for information purposes only, and everybody's welcome.
And what social media is available for people to see for the opposition to 555?
Well, I think there are a few main places you can find information. So first off, Southern Ohio HART, Southern Ohio H-A-R-T, which is a homeless response team. They do a lot of great work in reaching out and connecting folks. Another great resource is Community Action. If you have any resource questions, go to Community Action. And of course, there's Stop 555 Chillicothe online. That's where a few folks signed a petition. I was one of those people signed a petition in opposition to the legislation, and you can find a lot of good information there.
Is Community of Care something people can get involved with?
So it's the continuum of care to end homelessness, and it's a great organization, a great group that meets. It's an aggregate committee, and you can reach out particularly through Community Action to find out more about the continuum of care to end homelessness. Great organization. Mr. McKeever spoke well of it. It's a bipartisan organization. No matter what your perspective is on this issue, Continuum of Care is great to go to.
All right. Reverend Terry Williams, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.